everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Conservative Corner. I'm Elliot Margolis, and I'm here with my co-host Gail Burke. And the first thing we want to do is congratulate the United States of America for its 250th birthday. And I think for the most part, we're doing great after 250 years.
Right.
There's no other country in the world that can say that.
That's right.
So we're doing great. And because of the 250th, Gail came up with this idea of maybe we should talk about George Washington. He's the father of our country, and we wanted to congratulate him. He could probably hear us, I mean, depending on what you believe, but we want to congratulate him on doing such a great job. So Gail, why don't you start off talking about that?
Thank you, Elliot. Happy birthday, America. And George Washington was one of the founding fathers. He was the first president of the United States. And I believe that the founding fathers are very important to study, to gain an understanding of the American ideas of freedom and liberty. And this is something we need to impart to our children as well. We have to understand the lives of these men and the women to understand the American form of government and our ideals of liberty. Washington was 43 years old when he accepted command of the American Army during the war. It's called the Continental Army. He was the only major founding father without a college education. He had to leave school at the age of 15 because of financial concerns with his family. Despite his lack of formal education, he was a skilled surveyor and farmer, demonstrating a strong commitment to self-improvement and learning, and that he did very well. Thomas Jefferson called him the best horseman of his age and the most graceful figure that could be seen on horseback. That's quite a comment coming from Thomas Jefferson. General Washington embodies the phrase, losing the battle but winning the war, because during the American Revolution, he lost more battles than he won.
That's true, but he was also a better general than he was a strategist.
That's right.
And that came into being, I mean, he kept his army ready to go in spite of some real problems. Some of them didn't have shoes. It was wintertime.
It was a ragtag army, that's for sure.
But he kept the morale up. And he might not have won all the battles. Valley Forge is a good one that he did win, and that actually ended the revolution. But he was able to keep people ready to go, and he kept the morale up. And that's critical in war. And I want to read one of his quotes because I think it's real important. It's on my phone. So it's an important quote. He said, "To be prepared for war is one of the most effective means of preserving peace." And that's what Donald Trump is saying.
That's right.
It's what anybody who knows anything about war and peace, the best way to continue with peace is to have a good defense, to be strong so that nobody will attack you. Well, that's what's happened throughout our history. And the times that we were attacked, Pearl Harbor is a good example, and the World Trade Center, we really showed that we can fight.
Oh, yeah.
And we're fighting pretty good in Iran right now. So those words from George Washington were true then and true today.
Well, I uncovered an interesting fact about him. And long before email This was the 1700s, don't forget. He had his own mobile office. He had a writing desk that could be easily slipped into a saddle or a travel bag. This compact wooden box folded out into a mini workspace, complete with ink, quills, and paper. Perfect for dashing off orders while on the march. Think of it as an 18th century answer to a laptop. That's pretty good. Man ahead of his time.
Yeah, well, you know, he was ahead of his time, and he, even when he became president, which he didn't really want to be,
Right.
but he basically was encouraged by the Continental Congress to say, you're the guy. You've got the strategy, you've got the knowledge, you've got everything that's needed to make the United States good.
Yep.
And he did. I mean, his whole ideas, I mean, a good example. He was in charge, president when we had the Bill of Rights,
Right.
okay? And this has come into play so recently. The 10th Amendment, which I'm going to read. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So in other words, if the Constitution doesn't say, a good example is abortion. Doesn't have anything to do with abortion. So therefore, it's up to the states to deal with abortion and not the federal government, not the Supreme Court, which, by the way, proves that the Supreme Court was wrong 50 years ago with Roe v. Wade, and right when they ended the Roe v. Wade, because it's states' rights.
That's right.
And states' rights are so important to this country and to the way we live, because what's good in New York or California may not be so appropriate for Wyoming, you know, or Hawaii. And the brilliance of our founding fathers to think of things like this.
They were brilliant.
I mean, it's incredible. And there were probably some wives involved in it too. They don't get the credit, but I mean, I don't want to take anything away from the wives because I'm sitting next to you.
We'll talk about that later. Well, before he was president, Washington was already rewriting the rules of war from the shadows. In the fall of 1778, during the Revolutionary War, he quietly launched one of the most daring intelligence operations of the era, a secret spy network in British-controlled New York. It was amazing. Everyday citizens trained in code names and invisible ink. Now picture it, in the 1700s, this is going on. For nearly 5 years, not a single agent was exposed. And that was something. And the intelligence they provided contributed to America's victory in the Revolutionary War. He was also the only unanimously elected president, 2 times.
And he knew when to quit.
Yes, he did.
You know, that's another thing. He served 2 terms as president, said,
Yep.
enough. And up until Franklin Roosevelt, everybody served either just 1 or 2 terms. After Franklin Roosevelt, we did term limits for president. We need it for everybody, but at least we have it for that.
Yeah, yeah, and that was a good thing. What does every former U.S. president have in common? They all lived in one of the most iconic residences on earth, the White House, right?
No.
Not quite.
Okay, I didn't know where you were going with that, but George Washington is the only president that never lived in the White House. It was being built during
his
his
presidency,
time,
yeah.
but he never lived in the White House. He was in Philadelphia or in New York
Yep.
until Washington was built.
Well, one interesting little fact about him, maybe a lot of people know it, I don't know. His hair was his real hair. That was not a wig that he had on. But because the fashion of the day, he powdered it, so it looked like the wig.
You know, it's funny you mention his hair and stuff. I was telling somebody today that we were doing a show on, and they said, "Who's your guest?" And I said, "George Washington." And they said, "Who's dressing up as George Washington?" I should have done that.
Yeah, you should have. That would have been
I
funny.
powder my hair, I don't know.
He was also the greatest promoter of mule breeding in America. He thought mules were better than donkeys for their strength and endurance compared to horses, even though he was a very accomplished horseman. He also had a fear of being buried alive. And that was quite common in those days because medicine was not really that terrific. And a lot of people were afraid that they would be put into their coffin prematurely. So what he did, he had several of his people. He told them that after he was pronounced dead, he wanted them to keep poking at him to make sure he really was dead. So, and we found it humorous. I'm sure he didn't because it was a true fear in those days.
Medicine has come a long way since the 1700s.
Absolutely.
Another interesting thing about George Washington, too, was that he became a very successful farmer, Mount Vernon and all that, but he also had somewhere close to 300 slaves.
Yep.
And this is important because you got to remember the time of history that he was. Everybody had slaves then. Well, he had about 300, but towards his death, he realized, slavery is not right. So he decided upon his death and the death of his wife, all his slaves should be freed. And that was the beginning of getting rid of slaves.
Right.
Because I think Thomas Jefferson did the
He
same
did
thing.
the same thing.
And, slavery was something that was wrong, but it was part of the culture at the time.
That's right.
This country has evolved in a number of things, not only in slavery, but in women voting, because that could be kind of shaky too. But, when we see something wrong, we fix it. And I think that's what makes America great. We fix things when we see it's wrong.
Absolutely. And yet, there are still some groups of people that concentrate on the fact that we had slaves, that there were many people in the country that had slaves. What some people may not realize is that there were also blacks who owned slaves, and that the slaves that came to this country were already slaves. Their own country made them slaves.
And they were sold to us by black people
Yep.
as slaves.
Yep.
See,
And
that's one of the things that really bothers me about our education here today.
Absolutely.
We don't teach history. And history is very important because we learn from history. And there's so many liberals saying we shouldn't have this statue of this guy because he was a bad guy. Robert E. Lee led the army in the Confederacy.
Yeah.
But if we teach about Robert E. Lee, we learn. And if we learn that there was wrong going on in this country, we're better off. So by getting rid of the statues and getting rid of the history, history will repeat itself.
Yep.
We need history, and we're not teaching it very well here in Beverly, quite honestly.
No,
And we're not teaching it very well in the country.
no, we're not. Well, what they teach is they make sure that the children are well versed in slavery and how terrible it was and how we were an awful country for having slavery, for allowing it. Well, almost every country in the world has or had slavery. There are still countries today that have slaves, including China and including some countries in Africa. So, but the difference with our country is we knew that that was a problem and we tried to fix it. And we did fix it over the time. It took a long time because even when George Washington married Martha, she had slaves.
Well, Martha was a very rich woman.
Yes, she was, because she inherited it from her husband.
Right. Her
And
first husband.
Her first husband, that's right. And so Washington did want his slaves freed after he died, but Martha freed them before he died. She was afraid that the slaves might rebel because they had been slaves. So she decided a year after his death, she freed the slaves.
And it's important to know, too, I think, that George and Martha never had their own baby.
Right.
Okay, Martha had kids from her first husband, but just to be historical, they didn't have any children of their own.
And sadly, she outlived all of her children.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, she did. But George adopted them and treated them like they were his own.
And it's important to note, too, that when we had the Civil War, okay, more Americans from the South and the North died in the Civil War than any other war we ever had.
Americans killing Americans.
Americans killing Americans. But the Union prevailed, and, you know, that was a good thing. But a lot of people fought and died to free the slaves. So that's an important part of history that we need to understand.
It
And
is.
people are people, and we need to accept people for who they are and not what they are.
And certainly not the color of their skin
Right.
as well. And I think that we have, along the way, we have done that. And this country elected its first black president, although he wasn't really all black because he was black and white. And I think many people thought, well, look what they have done. After this, there will be no more talk about how bad we were and slavery and all of that. Wrong. That didn't happen because our black president didn't really promote that kind of thinking.
No,
Which
and
was sad.
Congress doesn't either.
And Congress doesn't either. No,
You see,
they don't.
you don't need to label people by this is the first black person that did this, or this is the first woman that did that. We're all people. And this is the first person that did this. That's fine. We don't have to identify, because sometimes by identifying
Yeah.
things like that, you're promoting racism or sexism. And we don't need to do that. We just need to know that people are doing good for this country.
And just think about it. 250 years we have been a republic.
Do people really understand what a
No.
republic is?
No. It's a democratic republic. It is not a democracy.
Correct.
And the founding fathers were very positive about it not being a democracy.
a democracy, and frankly, the liberals want to get rid of the republic and just have a democracy. But let me explain the difference, because this is real important. We have 50 states, and the founding fathers were brilliant. They said what's good for New York is not necessarily good for Florida. You have to have your own representatives, senators, laws, and the federal government just goes by the Constitution. The federal government does not go by individual state laws. So when we vote for president, we have an electoral college. And that electoral college says that Kansas and Wyoming and Minnesota vote one way, other states might vote another way, but if we didn't have the electoral college, New York, California, Florida, and Texas would determine who the president of the United States is. And that's just not right, because we have such a big variety of issues, and people in New York can't understand what they need in Wyoming. They can't, because they don't live that way. So a republic is a bunch of states, independent states, that have their own rules, but they must abide by the rules of the federal government first. And then they can make their own rules. And as we talked about earlier, abortion is one of those rules. Massachusetts, abortion is legal. The federal government doesn't have anything to say about that, and can't say anything about that, because it's not in the Constitution. I hope that clears things up a little bit.
I think so. I think it will. In 1798, John Adams was president, and he wrote, and I'll quote him, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." And that's what we always strive to be. We have huge bumps along the way as we look at our situation in the country today, with communists being elected to office, trying to take over. They have no idea what a republic is all about. And frankly, I don't think they care.
What you need to do is ask somebody who likes the Mandamis of the world, what socialist government has ever been successful? And the answer is zero. But you got to ask them. You know, people think, oh, I can go to the supermarket and get this free, or I can get this free, or the buses are free. Let me tell you something. The bus drivers need to get paid. You got to pay for your food, because the farmers need to get paid.
That's right.
The canners need to get paid. The workers in the supermarket need to get paid. There is nothing free in this world. And for Mandami to say free this and free that, well, guess what? It's not going to happen. What will happen is your taxes will rise. New York has some of the largest taxes in the country. Taxes will rise. Who's going to pay the taxes?
The government doesn't have any money.
Yeah, I mean,
it comes from the taxpayers.
Right, and it comes from the taxpayers. And what's happening in a lot of states like New York and California, people are moving out of those states because the taxes are too high. So, you know, when Trump was in office his first term, he lowered the taxes, and some people were complaining. But you know what? Because he lowered the taxes, believe it or not, the country took in more cash, because more people had money to spend.
That's right.
And that's so critical. Taxes are a negative. You have to have some, no question about that. But the more you have, the more dangerous it is. I mean, some of these countries, you know, the Russians of the world and even up in Scandinavia, they pay 70, 80% of their income in taxes.
That's right.
Now, okay, yeah, the medical care is free. Yeah, you're paying through the nose for the medical care there.
Exactly.
You have to understand the system. And the system is free enterprise works. It allows you to earn as much money as you want to earn. It gives you the incentive to work harder and to make more money and to have a better life. Or communism, which takes the incentives away because everything is free and you own nothing yourself. Your choice.
Well, you know, and you're right, choice. You have a choice as an American. I was talking to my daughter-in-law the other day. She's an immigrant from Vietnam. And she remembers when the communists took over Vietnam. And she was just a young girl, but her father had been in the military in the South Vietnamese Army, and he was sent to prison. And her father said to her that he wanted her and her siblings, she had 3 siblings, to leave because he knew what was going to happen. And he told her, because of me, you will never be able to amount to anything because they have my name and they have your name, and they're not going to let you. So if you want to achieve, you've got to leave here and go to America, which she did with her siblings, and left her father and mother behind and made a life for herself. And her siblings did as well, very successfully, very smart people.
Yeah.
Before we end our program, which we're getting close to, I just wanted to say a few words about Martha Washington. Martha was a very important woman to the president and to the country. After George left Mount Vernon in 1775, he did not come back home for 6 years. Every year during those long winter months, the general asked Martha to join him in his winter encampment. Now imagine that. You know what the traveling was like in those days. Every year she made the journey to his camp, whether it was at Cambridge, Valley Forge, Philadelphia, Morristown, Newburgh, or elsewhere. And she stayed there for months at a time. Martha was able to be with her husband for almost half the time he was away. And the general regarded his wife's presence as very important. And I think that led to him being father of our country, one of the most successful generals in the world at the time, and gave us, along with the other founders, what we know today as the United States of America. So for him and for all the other founders, I want to say thank you from all of us, and happy birthday, America.